In the late 1980s, Los Angeles wasn't just dealing with smog, traffic, or crime. It was dealing with something most people never thought about until helicopters showed up above their homes at night: the Mediterranean fruit fly, or Medfly. For a few years, the fight against that tiny insect turned into one of the strangest and most controversial public health sagas in California history. On the surface, it was about protecting crops, but for millions of Angelenos, it was about being sprayed in their own neighborhoods with a chemical they didn't fully understand. The Mediterranean fruit fly is a small insect, native to North Africa, that lays its eggs in fruit. When the larvae hatch, they feed on the flesh, making the fruit rot from the inside out. For California, a state that built so much of its economy on agriculture, citrus, grapes, avocados, the Medfly was a nightmare scenario. If the insect spread unchecked, it could devastate billions of dollars worth of crops. That's why in 1980, when the Medfly was first detected in Los Angeles County, the state moved quickly. At first, they tried traps, lures, and limited pesticide treatments in small areas. But by 1981, the flies kept appearing. Each time agriculture officials thought they had wiped them out, more showed up. By the mid-1980s, the problem had reached crisis levels. Federal inspectors threatened to quarantine California produce, which would have cost farmers and the state billions. Governor George Deukmejian and state agriculture officials decided they had no choice but to escalate. Their solution was mass aerial spraying of malathion, an organophosphate pesticide. The plan was simple on paper: spray the chemical from helicopters over Los Angeles neighborhoods at night, coat trees and backyards, and kill the flies before they could breed. In practice, it meant millions of residents found themselves living under a literal cloud of pesticide. The first round of spraying began in 1981, but it was limited and didn't provoke much backlash. By 1989, though, when new Medfly infestations triggered the most aggressive spraying yet, public outrage boiled over. Helicopters flew low over suburban neighborhoods from Santa Monica to Glendale, releasing a mist of malathion mixed with a sticky substance designed to make it cling to leaves. Residents woke up to find their cars, patios, and children's toys coated in a chemical film. Official statements insisted it was safe, pointing out that malathion was widely used in agriculture and at doses far higher than what was being sprayed. But people didn't buy it. Parents worried about their kids breathing it in. Doctors reported spikes in asthma attacks and skin rashes after spray nights. Environmental activists warned that long-term exposure could carry risks the government wasn't acknowledging. At community meetings, angry residents shouted down agriculture officials, demanding to know why they were being sprayed without consent. Some filed lawsuits, others organized protests. In one neighborhood, protesters even tried to block helicopters with spotlights. The spraying turned into one of the most contentious battles between California's government and its citizens in the 1980s. Part of the problem was trust. Los Angeles in the 1980s had already lived through decades of pollution debates, from smog to toxic waste sites. People were used to being told something was safe, only to learn years later it wasn't. When officials repeated that malathion posed no health risk, many residents heard echoes of those earlier failures. The fact that helicopters sprayed at night, often without warning, only made it feel more secretive. Instead of reassuring people, the state's approach fueled conspiracy theories that malathion was more toxic than admitted, or that the spraying was an experiment in chemical warfare. The controversy reached its peak in 1989. That year, a massive Medfly outbreak threatened California's crops once again, and officials launched a large-scale campaign of aerial spraying across Los Angeles. Residents in places like Pasadena, Culver City, and Silver Lake reported being sprayed multiple times in a single month. Lawsuits piled up, some demanding an immediate halt, others demanding compensation for health problems. The courts generally sided with the state, emphasizing the economic stakes, but the lawsuits kept the issue in the headlines and made the spraying a political nightmare. Governor Deukmejian defended the program fiercely, arguing that without it, California agriculture would collapse. His administration released studies showing that malathion broke down quickly in sunlight and was less toxic than everyday household chemicals. But critics countered that the real issue wasn't just toxicity, it was consent. Millions of people had no choice in the matter. Their homes, gardens, and bodies were sprayed whether they liked it or not. In a state that prided itself on individual rights, that forced exposure struck a nerve. Eventually, the controversy pushed officials to explore alternatives. By the early 1990s, scientists developed a sterile insect release program. Instead of spraying chemicals, they bred and released millions of sterile male medflies into the environment. Those sterile males mated with females, but no offspring were produced, gradually collapsing the population. The program worked. By the mid-1990s, the medfly threat in Los Angeles had faded, and aerial spraying ended. For residents, it felt like a victory, not just against the fly, but against a government program that had treated them like collateral damage. Looking back, the fruit fly spraying of the 1980s remains one of California's most unusual public health battles. It combined real science with real fear, economics with individual rights. On one side were farmers, politicians, and scientists trying to protect billions in crops. On the other side were ordinary Angelenos who felt like guinea pigs in a pesticide experiment. Both sides had valid concerns, and both were shaped by the unique pressures of Los Angeles in that era. Today, malathion spraying is remembered less for the science and more for the outrage. People who lived through it recall the sound of helicopters overhead, the sticky coating on their cars, the way their children coughed the next morning. For many, it symbolized a lack of control over their own environment, a moment when the state literally dropped chemicals onto their homes in the name of the greater good. The irony is that the program probably did save California agriculture. The medfly never became the devastating plague officials feared, but the political cost was huge. The controversy damaged trust between the public and state agencies for years afterward. The fruit fly spraying of the 1980s wasn't the most deadly or violent chapter in Los Angeles history, but it was one of the strangest. It showed how a tiny insect could upend a city, how the clash between science and fear could make helicopters into villains, and how even well-intentioned public policy can leave scars if it doesn't respect the people it's meant to protect.